As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, Chair of the Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Forrest Bell.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Here.
Meg Browers.
Here.
Dave Iverson.
Here.
John Tom Murphy.
Here.
Great. When I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Christy Ferrantella.
Here.
Alice, we heard from Lee Smith.
Here.
Great, thank you, Lee. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Sean Reed, I think we heard you a second ago.
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you. Ann Kuspa.
I'm here.
Great, thank you. And Colin Froelich.
Here.
Great, thanks, Colin. Good afternoon. This is an open meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation. Unless such participation is required by law, the meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Affordable Housing Trust is convening by video conference via the Zoom app conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. We'll turn to the first item on the agenda, but before we do so, permit me to cover ground rules for effective, clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. The chair will introduce the speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down a line of members each, inviting each to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking. Remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the floor is yielded to you and state your name before speaking. For members who wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment to the members of the public who have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and acknowledge and speak to the chair. Finally, each vote will be taken by a roll call. And I'm now realizing I missed the whole second row of trust members when I checked mics. Meg, did I do? I did you, Dave Iverson? You there? Okay, all right, great. With that, we'll jump over to the agenda pages. We'll call the meeting to order. I think that we want to shift the agenda in order. Christy, is that correct?
Yes, we're just gonna move items 8 and items 9. We're gonna take the year-round deed restriction prior to the lease to locals.
Okay. And I do not see Judy here yet.
She will be hopping on by the time we get through the admin things, and then she does have a time restraint, so we're just gonna take her first.
Great. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda with the edits of moving 8 and 9 to position 4.
Motion to approve as amended, Mr. Chair.
There a second? Thank you. Vote by roll call. Forrest Bell. Good, take you.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
John Tom Murphy.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan's aye. For the agenda, item 3, public comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to have a moment for public comment? Sean, I think this is where you want to come in unless you want to wait for the item.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chair, and the rest of the board. My name's John Reed. I own a duplex at 13 Cedar Circle, and I am a landlord, and we currently are participating in the pilot program of the Lease to Locals program. I believe that was originally Act Now, and from my understanding, it's kind of moved into the hands of the Affordable Housing Trust, if I'm correct, or at least the funding for the program could potentially. Yeah, I just wanted to come on here and speak to the fact that I've had a great experience with the Lease to Locals program. It's hugely beneficial to me. We recently purchased one of the condos in the duplex this past November, and everyone's aware of the market, the current market and interest rates and, the cost of cash and, all those things. And the grant hugely benefits us because it basically allows us to house year-round tenants using that program, and just helps offset the cost of that. It's not something that we were short-term rentaling in the past or anything like that. We're able to house 5 year-round tenants using this program. I think it's hugely beneficial if the program stays fully funded. The major factor that I see in play is that this was the pilot program. It's, for a 1-year period. And I think the biggest thing for people participating in it, whether it's landlords or tenants, is they want some type of commitment more than a year because, in people's minds, I think the hardest thing is you just don't know. It's fear of the unknown. And they could potentially have to move, in September, October, November, kind of whenever the property went online with this program. So I'm just here to basically say I've had really good experience with it. And I did read some of the packet. I think it's a huge mistake if it's only funded 50% to returning participants. I look at that as just not good enough. I'm not making a ton of money in my situation because I recently purchased. It's not like I had a ton of equity in the property and stuff like that. This helps me basically break even, not including taxes and insurance. So we're still footing the bill for those types of things. But the grant program allows me to rent to locals and to people who work and live here year round. And without it, we just wouldn't be in a position to do that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was in public comment. I'd be happy to answer questions, whether it's now or any members of the Affordable Housing Trust are more than welcome to contact me in the future as well.
Thank you, Sean. We don't do question and answer during public comment, but we're happy to take your comment. And if we have any, we'll come back to you at a future date. Appreciate you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other members of the public that want to take an opportunity for public comment? Any members of the board as a member of the public? Seeing no reactions, I'm going to close public comment and we will jump up. Shanta.
I can unmute myself. I just wanted to add that it's really nice to get another side of the story for how it's all been working out. So thank you, Sean, for joining us and for sharing that. It's good to get another perspective.
Great. Thank you, Shanta. And with that, I'm going to go to, is it 8 or
Yep.
9?
No, you can keep going through the administrative things. We're just switching 8 and 9. So
Okay, switching 8 and 9. Got it. So we are looking for an approval of the minutes. I believe that Penny's not here today, but I know that she sent some edits back. Was the edited version the most recent version that was sent around?
No, Penny sent the edits back yesterday, and I have some edits from Christy, and I have some edits also from Meg Browers to add to it.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we should send those back around and carry this over to a future meeting since we don't have a look at them. So I will close approval of minutes, move to an announcement on Habitat's lottery is open until July 15th. Christy, do you want to add anything here?
It's the same announcement I've made the last couple of trust meetings, but the lottery is open for 4 homes for home ownership. And that's until July 15th. So just encouraging families, everything's on their website. You can also reach out to Jennifer Costanzo with any questions. But just want to make sure everyone knows about this home ownership opportunity that was funded through the Affordable Housing Trust.
And Christy, these the AMI level that these applications, the lottery's at?
This is for 80% AMI or less.
Thank you. Any other comments on the announcement? Seeing none, close announcements and we will move to keep going, closing cost assistance. Okay, so the first application that we have is for 65R Myacomet Ave. Ellis, is this a complete application?
It's a complete application. They had all the paperwork. I looked through it. It's the right AMI. They have the right certification, the loan estimate, the executed PNS. They actually came in with all of it already done all at once. It's great.
So this is a 175% AMI. Does anyone have any questions from the board? Hey, Robert Little, can you mute your device for us? Okay, so going back to the application, is there a motion from any members on the board? Any questions or comments? So I guess I'd be looking for a motion if someone was prepared to make it to approve the application for closing cost assistance.
I'd like to make the motion for, to approve the closing cost assistance, for, 65R Myacomet, up to, what is it, 15,000? Did I do that correctly?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you, Chantal, for jumping in. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
A second for Meg. We'll vote by roll call. Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Meg Browers,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
Forrest Bell,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. Moving on to the next application, we have 7B Green Meadows.
This is the same thing. He has a full application. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here. He was so excited about the new house. He came in with the full application. He's also at 170% AMI. I have executed PNS, bona fide loan, estimate, certification from Housing in Nantucket that he was income verified. So he had a full application.
Are there any questions on the application? Sorry, I've got my head cocked. I'm trying to read the sideways real quick. Forrest, go ahead.
I just have one question. I'm new to this, so I'll have a bunch of newbie questions for you guys. But on June 11th, Ellis made a motion to postpone the vote on this application. Is it because he lacked an executed PNS?
Yes, he was waiting for his lawyer and the seller to sign the PNS.
Okay, and that is fully completed because I kind of flipped through his application and there is an executed PNS available.
Now there is an executed PNS. He gave it to me after last meeting.
Any other questions on this application?
Motion to approve this closing cost assistance.
Is up to a friendly amendment, Tom, up to $15,000 for any remaining proceeds to be returned to the trust. Is there a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second from Chantal, vote by roll call. Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Meg Browers,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
Forrest Bell,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. Okay. So the next application, there's a couple of items to discuss. This is the application. We didn't have the full application at the start of the meeting that Chantal just sent. Also, this application is for a 240% AMI. We should have a discussion. We
Ellis just sent, sorry.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Alice. At 240%, we previously have taken a vote that we were only funding closing cost assistance up to 175. So if we want to entertain this application, we need to have a policy conversation prior to. And then we should either take a minute to review the application now that we have it completely, or put it off to a future meeting. Christy, and then I'll come to you, Meg.
Yes, I just wanted to add that we had a meeting agenda item, as Brian mentioned, where we said we wouldn't go over 175%. And then at the last meeting under board comments, it was discussed if we should raise the CCAP to 240%. And then at that time, we did get an application at the 240%. So if the trust wanted to have a discussion around the policy, we do have another meeting next week where we could discuss the policy today and review the CCAP at a different meeting if needed. Or we could hold both for the next meeting, but I just wanted to bring it to your attention that there are homes that are selling at the 240% deed restricted level. So if we wanted to have that conversation, I just wanted to bring it to the board.
Meg, and then I have a thought on procedure.
Thank you, Brian. My question for Christy through you, Mr. Chair, is what, if any, restrictions have we placed on spending for CCAP funding? Do we have a cap? Do we have a number that we usually limit to? Are we restricted in funding in any way?
So
Do you want to cover that one? Or?
Yep, so we limit the funding per household up to $15,000. We've done on average about 10 units a year, 10 CCAPs a year. And that funding is, some of it comes from CPC funding, previous authorizations, and then now we have the $6.5 million override that we can use towards the CCAP applications as well.
And the closing cost items, it is specific to what it can be spent on, Meg.
I think you answered my questions. Thank you.
I guess, so here's my procedure question, and I don't know who I'm asking of it, Christy or Lee, who wants to jump in, but changing the policy wasn't on the agenda for this discussion. So I think we need to be able to vote on this application. We need to probably move it to a future meeting after an agenda item of a discussion on the policy and changing the policy or not. Also, with the application not being complete at the time of the meeting, the start of the meeting, I think maybe potentially we should change. Lee, thank you for coming on screen. Am I thinking appropriately, or?
I'd agree with you, Mr. Chair, that I think you want to have the policy discussion and vote at a future meeting where it's on the agenda, but I think you could also have it as a later agenda item in the same meeting, a vote on the application, assuming you change the policy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we know the person's timing on this PNS? We do, because it's here.
August 8th is when they're closing. So we do have a meeting next Wednesday.
Okay, so I recommend we keep this item on the agenda, put it after a policy discussion agenda on closing cost assistance limit, is my suggestion. Is it that the board have any other thoughts? Seeing none, we'll take that and move on to the next item on the agenda. Item 7, request for approval of execution of documents in connection with Meadows 2 rental housing development project. Christy, I'm going to kick to you, and then I think probably Lee, and then go from there.
Yes, so at the June meeting, the trust approved a grant to Richmond to buy down some of the market rate units to affordable rental rates. And in doing this, we have to amend their local initiative program application with the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So this motion, or this agenda item, is to have a motion to authorize the chair or vice chair to sign off on these documents to be submitted to EOHLC. And ultimately, this will allow us to apply for safe harbor at the end of this year, using a combination of these units with the Habitat for Humanity homes on Wade Drive.
Awesome. Does Christy, does that need any more clarity from Lee, or does anybody have any questions? So be looking for a motion, as Christy stated, to have either the chair or vice chair sign these documents.
I'll make that motion as stated by Christie.
Thank you, Shanta.
Second,
Second from Meg by roll call, Forrest Bell,
Aye.
Meg Browers,
aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Shanta Murphy,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. Okay, we're plugging along. We will now jump to item 9, year-round deed restriction pilot program. Judy Barrett, it's wonderful to see you.
It's good to see you too. Actually, it's
Thanks for-
wonderful to see you all.
We'll jump right in with it, with you. I think you have a timeline and a schedule, so
I'm fine now. We were having a new copier installed and it was chaos here, and now all of a sudden it's very peaceful and wonderful. So I don't have any constraints at this point till 2 o'clock. So I'm not sure I'm the right person to bump this to, but I think Christy and I may want to sort of team tag on this. I know there were a lot of questions, actually most of which did not surprise me. I think it's great that people are kind of reading this now critically and saying, oh my God, what about X, Y, or Z? A lot of them were policy questions. They needed decision from you folks. I think Christy did a really nice job kind of laying out, here's a way to think through them. I have a few additions, nothing in conflict with what anything Christy had suggested, but maybe just a couple of additional points. What is going to be the most helpful way to the trust to go through those questions? And I guess before you answer that question, I'm wondering if, now that you've seen them all, are there other questions that are not on that list? Because if there are additional questions that trust members have, it would be great to maybe get them on the list, perhaps not to be able to respond to them today, but to at least know what's the bigger picture of guidance or help that you need in order to be able to roll this out.
So I think if we come back a little bit higher
Sure.
on the specific detail questions, if we can get an understanding of the steps and the timing, and Christy, I have some understanding that this need to be approved at the trust, go out for RFP, and applications are going to come back in, which will create likely a never-ending list of questions, Judy. And it will have to evolve, and it is a pilot that does have a spending cap. So Christy, can you describe to the group what a rollout on timing and how quickly we could get to a place? And then that'll help inform, I think, some of the rest of it, Judy.
Sure, it's fine.
Absolutely. So because this will be a purchase in real estate, it will go through an RFP process with the finance department. So we have to finalize the guidelines that Judy has put forth, is in your packet. And those will basically, the application and the guidelines will be what gets issued by the finance department, and then homeowners will be able to apply. Hold on. Sorry. And homeowners will be able to apply through that process. It will be an open RFP, so it would probably be open for over a year, and people can submit their applications and they'll be reviewed on an ongoing basis. The current guidelines do say that a decision would be made within 2 weeks. I would suggest that is expanded a little bit, so that my office has some time to review these. But the idea is that the turnover time would be maybe 30 days to 45 days. And then from there, it would just have to go through the finance process of, going through legal, having an agreement, and recording the deed and issuing the payment. So it's not something that's, an overnight thing. It will take some time, but I think finalizing some of these questions that have come through since the community has found out about just got more public attention with an article in the newspaper. There's been a lot of interest in this program, and questions that are coming up. So I think at least addressing some of these questions, if we can, then will help us at least issue this, knowing that this is a pilot program. So we may have other questions that we have to address at a later time.
Okay, great. Thank you, Christy. Members of the board, does anybody have any particular high level, or should we go right to the questions? Right to the questions, Chantal. Christy,
So
you can,
there she is. I was going to jump in for you if you needed me to, but go for it.
So I can actually share my screen and share the questions. So this is all in the packet, which is also posted publicly. And what I did was basically have the questions that have come in from community members and then had a staff recommendation. So I think one of the big overall questions, can the property be rented year round or does it need to be owner occupied? I think Brian, you can hop in. What might be best is ask the question, give a staff recommendation, and then we can either say thumbs up, thumbs down, or if you guys want to discuss more.
that sounds efficient. Thank you.
Okay. So the first question was if the property could be rented year round or if it needs to be owner occupied, and staff recommendation was to allow a year round rental. Getting a lot.
So I have some question on that, and in substance, I agree with the concept of a year-round rental. But do we have any concern or thoughts about the funding going to owners that own multiple units, or does it matter to us in an aggregation? If somebody comes in with 50 units and takes the whole pilot budget on one, does it matter if the units are already occupied and rented year-round? Do we want to only offer the funding for the restriction per owner? Just throwing it out there to think of.
Good question.
Okay. So I'll come to Meg and then Chantal.
I had that question as well, Brian, and my 2 cents would be that I think this plays into the timeline question that we'll discuss later, but I think the trust should reserve the right to approve
Multiple.
units. Well, yeah, like we reserve the right to approve or deny multiple units from any one individual or corporation. And I think that for me, the year-round rental versus owner occupied is a moot point so long as we're providing housing to someone, 10 months of the year, right? I guess my question is just the owner has to live in Nantucket for a minimum of 10 months or the renter has to live on Nantucket for a minimum of 10 months. Am I correct in my understanding with that? And then for those 2 remaining months, whether it was a renter or owner occupied, there's still the stipulation that they cannot rent it out separately for more than 2 weeks, correct?
Correct.
Sorry, I'm throwing a lot out there, but I feel like all
Yeah.
those things tie in together.
The guidelines have that short-term rentals would be restricted under our zoning.
Chantal?
I was wondering about that too. That's the one that, that thing you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's the one that's been waking me up at 2 in the morning. On the one hand, my concern, which I'm sure is probably many of your concerns, is that what about the guy who owns, God, I wish I owned 200 units, but he owns 200 units on the island and he throws all of them in this program and there goes all the money. But also at the same time, how amazing would it be if that guy decided to put all 200 of his units in the program and now we don't have to worry about him short-term renting all of those too. So it's like it's a tough one. But I feel like we shouldn't restrict ourselves out of the opportunity to grab those units or those properties as deed restricted,
I don't disagree with you. My concern is maybe in so many calendar years, like I worry about funding that guy to take subsidy to go out and buy more units in cash that aren't available to somebody else. So it creates, this year-round investor marketplace that is concerning. So it keeps me awake too. Christy?
We could do something similar to what you guys have been proposing with the lease to locals where it could be limited. And this is a pilot program, so you could maybe say, 2 properties or 3 properties max, per owner, and then once we have a permanent funding source, like a real estate transfer fee, and we could expand, then maybe we could capture that owner with multiple units. But maybe for the pilot, we do limit it.
Thanks, Christy. Dave?
So with the pilot program, we're income restricted. So I think that would leave out people like Mr. Platt and others that own multiples, correct? At least until the home rule petition portion gets through.
Well, that becomes part of the question. Are we doing the 240 on this says the occupant, but we're doing it on the ownership as well? I just to be clear that.
Well, that's who we'd be paying for the restriction, correct? The owner.
Yeah.
And that's income restricted, correct? Until we get the home rule petition through?
That is correct. So the question becomes the next line here says, does the tenant need to be income qualified at 240? So if it's the owner of the property that needs to be income qualified at 240, do we need to income qualify the tenant? I don't know that we do.
Oh, what's the intended benefit?
Yeah,
A year-round occupant.
But I fear that someone over 240 is making enough money to pay. Well, I guess it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I would argue that this should benefit people that can't afford or struggle to find places to rent. So I don't know. That's a good question.
It would potentially eliminate businesses renting for employees year-round. But to your point, it would help a broader group that is struggling to find units and not have them connected to tenants. Chantal, and then Meg?
So excuse me. Personally, I think that since we're already restricting the homeowner, I think it's a lot to restrict the tenant as well. And hear me out. I think about people that I know that are in that 240 and above that are also struggling to find year-round housing as well. I don't think that we should be limiting that part of it. We have a lot of programs that help a wide range of AMIs that I think we should at least have one that's a little bit broader.
Thank you, Chantal. Meg?
I'm just reading out of the packet that came in this meeting's packet, and it says that year-round residents occupying a deed restricted property shall have a total income that does not exceed 240. So the way I'm understanding this, it's the occupant who's income restricted. And I'm trying to back up and think about the purpose of the program is to restrict households to year-round occupancy. So since we reserve the right through this program to pick and choose the best fit for homes in this program, like it's a case-by-case basis, we decide for every house that's, for every applicant, whether their house and the amount it would cost for us to buy the deed and the property itself and the dwelling that it offers, the year-round rental community or occupancy community, is it a good fit for our program? So if there were a house that was owned by someone whose AMI exceeded 240, but still wanted to restrict it, and the value that we offered them for the deed was something that they accepted and was worth it to us, I don't think that should negate us in continuing with potentially deed restricting that property. So I don't know that I would recommend that we limit ourselves in the pilot program to the owner having income limits, because we reserve the right to approve or deny every application.
So the problem there, Meg, is that we are restricted at the trust via our charter to only spend money up to a 240 percentile. And so my question would go back to Judy or Lee. With the restricted funds up to 240%, and the asset that we're buying is part of the title, I would assume the person who receives the money would have to qualify at 240 or less.
So if a developer came to you, who was, I'm just being hypothetical, developer comes to you,
Yeah.
is building some market rate homes and says, I want to restrict one of these for a year-round benefit. Does the developer have to income qualify, or is it the party who's ultimately going to live in the unit?
It's a great question.
Can I
Because I
follow
think you have
up?
to think about it that way.
I guess the question is, what does our charter allow us to do? Can we go to either side of the equation? Is my question. We'll go Meg for Chantal.
Yeah, to follow up with your response, Judy, through you, Mr. Chair. Does our charter say that the person who's receiving the benefit has to be within our income restriction? Because in this case, I believe the person receiving the benefit is the occupant of the home who's income restricted.
Anybody want
I
to
can
touch that one?
I can tell you what I understood when I worked on this, which may have been all wrong. My understanding was that we were trying to make a unit affordable in a range for people living and working in Nantucket year-round at or below 240% of AMI. I thought of it as the occupant, because in the affordable housing world, that's the way I would typically think. That it's the occupant who's the beneficiary. I mean, I'm probably out of line here, but I don't really care what the income is of the person who owns the house. What I care about is that unit going to be available to someone who is living and working or trying to work as a year-round resident of the town of Nantucket? To me, that's the benefit of the program.
Thank you, Judy. I'm going to come to Forrest and then Chantal.
I have the exact same question as Meg, because the way I look at it is that the renter is the beneficiary. We're giving an incentive to the homeowner who may or may not actually need it because they can rent their house, at a higher rate to other occupants. That so that 240 would apply to more of the occupant rather than the homeowner, because that's who's actually benefiting from the deed restriction, I think, in the long run. And it's actually in some cases it might actually be detrimental to the homeowner to restrict that property. So they're almost kind of, they're getting a little incentive to kind of pull back on the possible potential market value of their property. I may be incorrect, but that's just the way I would interpret it.
Thank you, Forrest. I think you're absolutely correct. Oh, I also want to be cautious we don't focus too much on the rental of one, because there could be owner occupants and these could be buyers. So there's a lot of scenarios in this. Chantal?
Never mind. I think I beat the horse. It's dead. I'm gonna leave it alone now.
Okay. So it sounds like there's general agreement that it was a staff recommendation, that it was a staff recommendation was yes. It seems like we all kind of circled back to the tenant. We're working with the 240 because that's where our charter allows us to get this out the door. If there is a future opportunity through seasonal communities to go above 240, we'll come back and bring that in a future conversation. Caleb, I'm going to stick with the board to get through these questions. If you want to save yours to the end, that would be great, just because there's a lot and I don't want to get too far off track here. Next one on the list, Christy.
Okay, so if we do agree that we're gonna income qualify either the tenant or the home ownership, or the homeowner, the question that came in was who would be income qualifying these people, and it's recommended that we should have an agreement with an agency to income qualify applicants, and that should be part of their paperwork when they submit the application. I'm getting a lot of head shakes. Good. Okay.
General thumbs up on that. Okay, great.
The guidelines say it needed to be occupied 10 months out of the year, can the other 2 months be rented long-term? And I said, yes, as long as they're longer than 31 days. So they're not considered a short-term rental and that the tenants meet the program qualifications. Got some thumbs up there.
I'm kind of 50-50 personally on that one. I think the idea is that you're just not in occupant, like you're not in residence. I don't know that creating a rental opportunity is.
You know, I'm jumping in. I should, can I
Please,
raise my hand?
Judy, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, again, in the affordable housing world, one of the requirements is a 1-year lease. So I didn't get the impression that someone might occupy it for 10 months and then suddenly there's no rental income coming in for the unit. I assumed that they were at liberty to leave the island for up to 2 months. But I always thought of this as a 1-year lease. I don't know how you do this. Otherwise, that's my opinion.
That was my general mindset, that you may not be in residence on Nantucket for 2 months cumulatively through the course of the year, but not to be able to vacate to sublet it out was my, or
Right.
it's your primary residence and you're there. If you take a 2-week vacation in December and one in July, and that was my personal
Yeah.
thought. We'll go to Dave, Chantal, then Meg.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I agree with Judy that this is a year-round. This is a local. This is trying to get people in year-round housing and to make it possible for them to rent shorter than a year. I think just goes against what we're trying to do here. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Chantal.
I think we have to keep in mind that some of these might be owner occupied as well, and mortgage rates are high. And if there's some folks who, let's say they're teachers, they're out of school during the summertime and they want to go on a grandparents tour and go visit family members throughout the summer with the kids. I feel like it's very un-Nantucket to tell people that while you're away from your house, you can't rent it for a month or 2 months while you're not occupying it. Especially because we know that the cost of living out here is so high. Mortgage rates are incredibly high, and we all have to kind of scrounge up wherever we can to continue to afford to live here. I think that we need to look at it while we're looking at this very broadly. We need to also take into consideration that there might be a different set of rules for those who are choosing to rent versus those who will occupy the unit.
Thank you, Chantal. Meg.
Thank you, Brian. I recall in previous conversations, we discussed no more than the state tax allowed state tax exempt 2-week rental for like an owner occupied unit, for example. And for me, this is an either or. You're either buying into the year-round deed restriction program and taking that financial incentive, or you're short-term renting your home for the summer and you're taking that financial incentive. But double dipping doesn't seem fair, because that does not, to me, that does not align with the intention of this program. So I would suggest not allowing the recommendation for the 2 months that the tenant or owner may not occupy the home to be a long-term rental. I don't think that it should be rented any more than the 2 weeks state tax exempt opportunity.
Thank you, Meg. Judy, go ahead.
I just think if we're trying to help someone rent who is trying to live on Nantucket and trying to work there, that they should be offered a 1-year lease.
And in the owner occupant scenario, Judy?
Well, if the owner wants to take off from time to time, as long as they're living there, according to the program rules, which is a minimum of 10 months a year, then, that's their choice. But I think let's also all keep something in mind. This is a pilot program. And there are going to be other warts that none of us have even thought about they're going to come up with this program. And I would keep it at the pilot level as simple as you can. This is for you to live in Nantucket. It's not for you to rent if your intent is to live in your home. If you are purchasing this for the purpose of creating a year-round rental, then you owe that tenant a 1-year lease. Simple.
Thank you, Judy. Dave?
Yeah, and to take that a little bit further, you're taking taxpayers' money, right, to buy down this affordability. So if you're owner occupied, I'm with Meg, you can have your 2 weeks freebie, but anything beyond that, like, so we're gonna pay people money to make their house more affordable as a year-round house, and then we're gonna let them short-term rent it for 2 months. That just doesn't, I don't think any taxpayer would agree to that. And even though I completely hear what Chantal is saying, I just don't think that I think that if we let that happen, people will look at us at the Affordable Housing Trust Fund a lot different and question our stewardship of taxpayer dollars.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you, Dave. Chantal?
I think that, I think we're being a little short-sighted in this. The point of the year-round deed restriction is for us to create a year-round deed restriction, in perpetuity. You know, it's not about what happens, like, we're not creating it for the year of the pilot program. The whole point is to capture as many units so that we don't continue to lose properties to these short-term rental large companies that are coming out here and buying up all the places that they possibly can to turn them into short-term rental units in all of our once year-round communities. I look around my neighborhood and I think there are like 6 of us left. You know, and if I'm sure if the folks next door that sold their house, if they could have put this in a year-round program and helped pay down some of the mortgage after losing a family member that was helping to pay that, I'm sure they would have done it in addition to being able to rent it for 2 months if they so chose. Not saying that they will, and we'll probably find that not a single person's going to do that, because at the end of the day, we're all looking for year-round housing. We all need somewhere to live, who has somewhere that they can go for 60 days, you know, and rent their house. I think that I think we need to look beyond just this 1 year and think about what can we do to make this flexible while being responsible with taxpayer dollars, and try to gather as many of those units in this program as possible. It's my only point.
Thank you, Chantal. Forrest?
I see Chantal's point. It's she's basically saying just to maximize the number of units on island that would be deed restricted. My only reservation is who says in those 2 months that people actually take off. But if I can rent my place for 10 grand, I'll move into a place for 3 grand over the summer, or move on my boat, or move in with friends. And would that still qualify them to receive, you know, a financial incentive from the trust?
Okay. It's good conversation. There's good points here. I'm falling with Meg and Judy and Dave on the owner occupied, no more than 2 weeks. And if it's a tenant, it's a year-round lease and you're in it and there's no subletting. This is kind of where I'm falling. Tom, I saw you just come on screen. Did you want to? Nope, you're good. Okay. So, Christy, I don't know that we're going to get full consensus. We're not necessarily taking votes on each one, but that gives you an idea. Moving to the next one.
Okay, so then the next one, will the trust be doing an inspection of the property? And what if it's not in good condition? How would we be rating this? Staff recommendation, in talking with other programs, they have an affidavit in the certifying that there are no known code violations of the property. And then we could also include in the RFP part of our advantageous scale. You know, if it's in poor quality, it could be least advantageous. Those are kind of the staff recommendations. I don't know if you guys have more thoughts.
Christy, would you want that certification to be from someone who's qualified to make that judgment?
Yes.
Personally, I think everything needs inspections, and whether the owner needs to provide a home inspection from a licensed home inspector. It's part of the equity of the deed and title that we're purchasing, so I think that whether, I don't know that a trust member is the individual to do it, but whether it's a home inspector or the town's real estate specialist, I think everything needs an inspection.
Okay,
Because it does affect the negotiation value of the asset that's there, and or an appraisal, like, are we getting an appraisal that is an inspection? Meg? Were you, I thought I saw your hand kind of, was that a question or?
I don't know if I pushed the button, but I was considering.
Okay.
I mean, well, first I was thinking, don't all homes need to be inspected for insurance purposes, at least as a baseline? So I don't know if that plays in at all, but it feels like, and I don't know if we're requiring an appraisal. We probably would have to, so that would be a line of defense. But I definitely think some kind of inspection, I mean, I don't know if we're inspecting for like, you know, livability standards or just some kind of potential value depreciation that might not be visible to us through an application process, but it seems like a good idea to do one of those things, Christy, through you, Brian.
Thanks, Meg. Judy?
If it's going to be used as a rental unit, I think you should require a Section 8 housing quality standards as the basis for an inspection. Because any affordable housing unit would have to meet that requirement. It's just basic housing quality. It's nothing fancy, but it certainly would be what you would want to do. You know, for a unit that's going to be either continue to be owner occupied or become a for sale to a year-round buyer, I think you've got to have some type of, you know, a qualified home inspection done. And it's not, you know, again, it's some of it's code violations. Some of it's the age of the systems in the house. You know, we sometimes go through this with inclusionary zoning where a developer is allowed to provide an offsite unit. I can't tell you the horror stories that have gone on with those, because units that are existing that were used to satisfy an inclusion requirement actually ended up with like a heating system that was going to die. But there was no obvious code violation. So you need to kind of know the condition of this unit so that potentially a buyer who is not going to be, you know, who's not going to have a lot of money is going to be able to live in that unit and not have something blow up on them 3 months after they move in. So a qualified home inspector would look at all that.
It all establishes value too, and if we're negotiating real value on the title, it's up.
Yeah.
Okay, moving from that one.
the next one asked if the trust would have any rating in respect to coastal resiliency. And would you accept deeds on properties that are at high risk?
I think that's a case by case basis personally.
Yes, I just put that the RFP would rate that.
Right.
The definition of a Nantucket employee is defined on page 2 of the guidelines, but then it's not used anywhere else in the guideline or the application. Is it required that you need to be a Nantucket employee for the pilot program? Staff recommendation, I looked at kind of what the trusts have been discussing around employment-based, what other programs we're doing where they require employment within that city bounds or town bounds.
Right.
And I also looked at how Provincetown is doing their lease to locals and how they're qualifying a tenant. So not to exclude retirees. They also include that if you're on a town board or committee or volunteering with a local organization.
Yep.
So it's up for discussion. I know if we focus just on employment, then we're excluding people who may be retired and looking at this program, which might be people who might be interested in the program that would be excluding in this pilot program.
Me personally, it's critical to include the retired people.
Yeah. I think that I lost sight of this was I was continuing to go through multiple iterations of the application packet. Because where we started on this, the very first discussions were about enabling people to live on the island who were trying to work there. But it did broaden, and I kind of never went back and sort of rechecked that. So I actually think the criteria that Christy has here are really good. Because we certainly would not want to, among other things, disqualify someone who has a permanent disability. So I think these are good.
How do we Christy, which line identifies retired? Person unable to work or is it?
Well, I guess I was kind of assuming that they are providing a similar benefit to the community on number 2. So contributing to the Nantucket community.
Right.
Okay.
The note in red is Penny's notes on the who she couldn't be here, but she didn't know if we wanted to include voter registration.
As part of the application process to.
Or as something that would qualify you.
Okay.
On its own, I would say no. I think maybe in conjunction with some other criterion, yes.
I would agree with that. Come to Megan, then to Shanta.
Would we consider doing something for number 2, which addresses potential retirees, where we require history living year round on Nantucket back a certain amount of time? As just
that could be a fair housing issue. If you're a resident, you're a resident.
If you move, maybe it's retired in a voter registration. But if you move here in retirement and you're prepared to offer the restriction to the community, doesn't matter when you get here. Shanta?
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. So, hypothetical situation. I live on Nantucket. However, I work for J. Jill Bank as a financial advisor. I work remote, but I volunteer at the Boys and Girls Club 1 day a year. Do I qualify? And I've been on the island for 2 years working remote. Do I qualify for the program?
And you own a home and you're prepared to offer a restriction on it? Yeah,
Okay.
I would think so. I think anybody's willing to offer the restriction.
Chantal, you said the person lives here year round?
The person lives here year round, works remote, but it says they just have to volunteer for an organization. So I volunteer 1 day a year. Like, let's say at the Tim Russert Summer Groove. I love that thing.
I guess I'm getting confused. This is the qualification for the 240% AMI tenant, not
Yes.
the owner of the restriction.
Mm-hmm.
I was under the impression it's both.
Or even if it's both, either scenario, same person, put them in wherever you want, or put them in both and tell. I just want to understand it better. Am I making sense? Are you understanding me?
Yes, you're making sense to me, and I'm concerned it's really limiting to have to be an employee on Nantucket. I'm concerned it's limiting in the home ownership inventory in some way.
So if I'm a summer resident and I own, this would be ideal, but I own this beautiful house out in Pocomo. But I'm a summer resident. I don't want to say just, but I'm a summer resident on the island, and I'd like to put my home in this program.
Not qualified based on this.
Okay. Thank you.
I think that's the way I'm reading it and understanding it. Meg?
I don't think we're gonna have any difficulty spending the 2 million we've set aside with people who qualify as Nantucket employees in terms of either owner occupied or tenants. And so maybe for the pilot program, we go with the previous language where it says an employer employed with an employer based in Nantucket, and then some combination of qualifications to allow retirees as well. I'm just sensing, based on already the interest that we've received for this program, and we haven't publicized it or marketed it at all, I really think that we're not going to have a problem. So I don't love the idea of making it such a loophole-y thing where if you volunteer, you qualify. Like, let's maybe focus on the workforce and see how far we get. And I mean, it's our program. We qualify, we create the, program outline. And if we haven't had enough applicants, we could broaden it. I just feel really iffy. It doesn't make me feel like we're serving the year-round community the way we intend to, if we make the parameters vague enough to where there's too many loopholes.
Thank you, Meg. Dave?
Yeah, listen, I think that we need to keep our eye on the prize in the sense that, everyone says STRs this, people buying up that. The reality is that locals sell their houses to off-island people, and that's where we lose year-round housing. So I think we really need to focus on not losing those housing units more than anything else. I think we need to stay within that framework of not losing local housing units and not trying to bring in the guy in Pocomo or the guy here or the guy there. That we really need to focus on keeping those houses in the local loop, if that makes sense. So that's where I'm at on it.
Thanks, Dave. My comment is the family that has to date been most generous with their property with the Affordable Housing Trust was a family that wouldn't qualify for this, and they were the owners of White Street, who sold the property at a significant discount and would have taken advantage of this, and it has created an opportunity for us to create housing. So I think that we should not exclude. We can look at applications case by case, but we shouldn't create a regulation that excludes anyone. I'm gonna go Tom and then Christy.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I completely agree. And it's something that we learned with what you said. And it's something we learned from the STR entire conversation with. There's so many different versions of why somebody would rent and what their situation is and what their family thing is. And that I don't think we want to necessarily cut down the general universe of that if we don't have to.
Thanks, Tom. Christy, and then Shanta.
Thank you. I was gonna say we could make this part of the RFP where the highest advantageous would be maybe somebody that is employed on Nantucket already. Then at least advantageous. I don't know if that goes against fair housing or anything, just kind of spitting that out. The other thing is even families that may not qualify for this program could still work with the trust in other ways, but there's still, the bargain sale if they were to sell to the trust or other ways that they could contribute to affordable housing that may not be a year-round date restriction.
Thank you, Christy. Shanta?
Thank you. Yeah, Brian, you said it much better than I was saying it. That was the point that I was trying to make, is that I'm worried that we're making this so restrictive that we're going to lose some opportunities is all. So I thought the whole point of this was to, again, get as many purchase as many year-round deed restrictions as possible. And I doubt the guy out in Focus is going to sell his house into this program, but how fantastic would that be if he did?
Right.
Right. I worry that we'll make it so tight that it just complicates it, and people are so confused that they think they don't qualify, or they just simply walk away saying it's too restrictive for them. And I liked the way Vail did it. It was great talking to that gentleman. It seemed like their program was just so broad that they were able that, and that's why they were able to be so successful with it.
Thank you, Chantal. Tom?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Judy said before, is that this is a pilot program, and there are going to be things that come up, and that we can tweak this as necessary with what we learn in at the end of the allotted time period.
Christy, does that give you enough direction?
Yes.
Great. Moving on to the next one.
Okay, we covered remote work. The next two, they need town council, so we may need to come back to these. But does a home need to have home insurance for the town to purchase a deed restriction?
So if a home has a mortgage, it's gonna have to have insurance.
But if
But if
there
it doesn't have a mortgage, do we care? I guess we do, because we'd like to see a house get rebuilt. And then not just, yeah,
um, okay, next one. Does the deed restriction follow the parcel if it is subdivided? Or would the new lot created be unrestricted?
it would be on the entire parcel at the time that it was purchased and any future creation on that parcel,
Right,
in my mind.
yes,
Because we would be paying for it at the time, equating that potential into it.
yes,
So if the person wanted to do the subdivision, only restrict one, we could do that deal versus the whole deal, but
mhm,
Perfect. I was asked if there's any criteria as to why somebody would get rejected. And as we've been discussing, this would go through an RFP process. So ultimately the trust may decide that something is least advantageous and may not want to go through with it, but I didn't have specific criteria that would reject somebody. Getting head shakes. Would there be we've kind of been talking about this, would there be an ability to apply for a hardship waiver? What if the owner of the home passes away and the family needs time to reoccupy it? I talked with Housing Nantucket about how they do their covenant. And I kind of feel like this could be a case by case basis. When things come up, they can come and talk to us, but I don't think it needs to necessarily be in the guidelines and have a policy.
right. Agreed.
Penny's question was who deals with this, and the time being it is the town's housing department and the trust.
Can I just comment on the rejection question?
Yep.
You know, ultimately the RFP is going to have to say, you know, here's our criteria, whatever they are. This is what would constitute highly advantageous, advantageous, or not advantageous. So you're still going to have to wrestle at some point with what is a not advantageous ranking on the criteria that are going to be used. So I don't think that goes away. I think we're going to have to chew on this a little bit. You almost have to experiment with writing out the criteria, Christy, and then see where you land.
Okay.
That's going to get hairy.
I'll look for your assistance in that.
Yeah, well, we can work on it back and forth. It's fine.
Perfect. Along with compliance, is there a fee for non-compliance if we're doing an annual audit and we find that somebody is not occupying it 10 months out of the year?
there needs to be a penalty, and I don't know how the fee is equated, but yes. I think that we should follow the same model of not paying your taxes, your property taxes. So I don't know what that penalty looks like, but is it a percentage on non-payment? And so is this a percentage on value of the restriction that was paid, I would guess. Meg?
Does Vail have a structure in place for this, a mechanism in place?
At Vail, I don't know the answer.
I will check.
What if someone's not complying? Is that the question?
Yes.
They say they will force a sale.
Which I think is ultimately what happens when you don't pay your property taxes. You can ultimately force a. So basically that would become a tax lien, and so this would become a lien on the house, and that would get settled at the time of the sale of the house and or, oh, great, Lee's coming in. Lee?
I'm not sure you've got statutory authority to do that.
Right.
To look at that.
I was going to say something about that. I think this is a town council question because it's not going to be a municipal lien.
You've got no lien.
Right.
I mean, you could, the deed restriction itself could have enforceability provisions. I don't think they'll have authority to foreclose on the house. Like,
Okay. So we're gonna have to peel that onion back a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Does owning a timeshare disqualify you from the program?
Yes. And we'll hold to the end on individual ones. Thank you.
Is the deed restriction resellable, i.e. could the homeowner pay the trust back and have the deed removed?
No.
That's what I figured, just
Simple. That's a good one.
want to make sure we have a great FAQ listed on our website. If you move the house off the site, does the deed follow the house or is it just on the parcel?
Oh my God.
Parcel.
Right.
We asked why we're excluding blood relatives. Again, the red is Penny's comment to be careful not to penalize those who are trying to help their relatives. Ellis and I felt that as long as it's like a market rate transaction, you're not kind of transferring it to your child, but then also asking for a deed restriction. Is it something that would help a family member buy the parcel from you?
I don't think we should restrict family members. The covenant program doesn't restrict that. You're reducing the value of the property when you accept the restriction, and you're passing that reduced value on to a family member.
What public money is being used for the covenant program?
Great question.
You know, sometimes when I look at questions like this, I'm reminded of something that a HUD program manager said to me years and years ago about a housing program that had a lot of problems. And she said, you should always think about, do I want this on the front page of the Boston Globe? And I know that is probably not always the way to think about these things, but sometimes you have to use common sense and say, there's already people who, you know, either don't trust what we do or don't trust government or, you know, think something is awry here. And how far do you want to go to expose yourself to that kind of risk when there's a lot of ways that need exist on Nantucket? How do you draw the line somewhere that reduces the risk of the program? And I think you really have to think about, you know, fortunately, you're all very concerned about the people who need housing, and I respect that. But at some level, you have to kind of almost take a little institutional interest and say, how do we protect this program from unwanted and probably needless criticism? Just a thought.
Hold on pilot, consider later. Anybody have a thought or opinion? Some general head shaking. All right, Christy. Moving down.
Can local businesses apply?
I think the answer is yes.
The staff recommendation was yes, as long as it's a year-round lease.
Then the question
Which-
becomes at what number of units do we want to stop it, right? Like, if a local business has 10 units, do they come with all 10? Or
Maybe.
is it only once per the pilot program?
I thought we had actually talked about this very issue at one point. And the feeling was, at least for the pilot program, no. I have no opinion one way or the other, but I'm pretty sure this came up. Because there were some concerns about, employer assisted housing generally. Policy issue, but
Forrest?
And I'm correct in understanding that the limit, the funds available is capped at $2 million, correct?
For now, yes.
Would there be a limit to the number of businesses that could apply? Because potentially businesses might be more on top of it than individual homeowners.
question.
Might be more prepared to apply for these funds, and then all of a sudden drain the entire pot, and then there's nothing left for individual homeowners. It's just a thought.
In that sense, on the RFP, we say no, and then if we have an issue distributing the $2 million, we can issue a second RFP that does include businesses.
Right, so we could hold off on pilot. And I assume this would go for the same question for developers. So we'd want this to be homeowners at the moment.
I think we need to, personally, I think we need to try the community members before the developers. I think ultimately we want as many as we can get, and there will be a path for developers, but how many community members individually can we help? Meg?
Thank you. I was just gonna make a comment on the employer one. I almost wonder if, and for employee housing, for the most part, how would they be able to income qualify all of their staff living in one place, like they may not even income qualify, so. I don't know. It's the thought.
To the next one, Christy, I think.
Okay. I was asked if the homeowner gets the appraisal or does the trust. In talking with other programs around the country, they usually have the homeowner do the appraisal as part of the application. And talking to Brian Turbot, he feels that the town needs to have an independent appraisal.
That's right.
So the staff recommendation was that an appraisal could be included. And then if we go through the process and it's rated advantageously, then we would order an appraisal. Otherwise, we may be ordering a lot of appraisals off the bat.
I think that's Tom.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Christy, is that something that Tracy can handle moving forward?
Doing the appraisal?
Yeah, or ordering them, what have you?
She can order them, but she doesn't do them.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that, I don't think it's going to be an avalanche of these, but just any extra burden, that's all.
Next question, I saw a lot of head shakes to that. The next question was, could potential home buyers apply for the program without a property in mind so that they have an approval and then go out and search for a home? I talked to the director of Truckee's program, and they actually have a two-step process where you apply for the program, but you're not awarded any funds or a dollar amount. You just start, they just say, yes, you qualify as an eligible buyer. And then they go out, find a home and come back and reapply for the funds. I didn't know if that is kind of burdensome or would that be something helpful to potential homeowners or buyers, that they could at least submit an application that says that they qualify for the program before they go out and find a home.
I think that the way that this market moves, you would need to know if you're qualified before you may have a home or not. If you're a buyer trying to get it, because the qualification for on the buyer side is going to be a challenge, I would think, just with the bank's aspects. Shanta?
Okay. So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. It is that I'm a buyer hunting for a house and I come to you, Christy, I want to qualify. I want to find out if I qualify for this before I even own a house. Okay. Isn't that just like a lot of extra paperwork for your office? Why not just have them wait till they buy the house? And because the list is on the website, they can look at it and say, okay, I qualify or not, if we're doing our jobs appropriately to spell out the requirements.
Can I just point something out in response to that? Several of the programs we looked at for another client that we've been doing this research for, only do this whole process at the point of sale. So they don't necessarily have a list of available properties. They are saying we have this program, our maximum amount is X. If there are income guidelines, they say what the income guidelines are. And it's almost like a buy down program. They're almost operating it like a buy down. I'm not saying that that's what you should do in Nantucket. I just want you to know that is the way several of them work in Colorado and in California. And part of it is because it became the easiest way to move the money.
Yeah, I think it ultimately happens at closing, but Chantal, to your point, like, we don't want to go through reviewing every application, but there needs to be some checklist so people understand if they're qualifying, so they can bring it to the bank and get to the table.
Right.
I think this is going to be a real challenge to make work at the bank level at the beginning, where it's going to take a lot of hand holding with a couple of local banks on that side of the transaction.
Just a few more. Will the trust be managing the program in-house, and will approval really be within 14 days? I talked about this a little bit at the beginning. Right now, we will be doing it in-house. Other programs that I spoke with do hire outside organizations to manage the program. I think past the pilot program, that might be something that the trust issues an RFP and looks at. But I also would recommend that we extend just to 30 days, just to give staff enough time. Got some thumbs up there. I was asked for a copy of the deed to show mortgage lenders, and I just said that that would be released at the time that we release the guidelines in the RFP, but that's something that town council will have to work with us on.
On the creation of the deed restriction.
Correct. Will the deed restrict any future development of the site, or could the homeowner request that? So if they have a potential, for a secondary or tertiary, but they only have a primary, could part of their negotiations with the town be that you couldn't do future developments? Or is there any restriction?
I think sure, but it comes into the appraisal and the negotiated value of the restriction.
Perfect.
You have to assume full build out at current zoning, but if the person wants to reduce that, it would reduce the value. That would have value to them. I like the way that person's thinking, asking the question.
Yeah. Is there a limit on the number of properties I can restrict? We've kind of been circling with this. I said as the pilot program, we should restrict to 2 properties per owner. I don't know.
For me, it's properties, not dwelling units. Because it could be 2 properties and 6 dwelling units, or 2 duplexes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
4 dwelling units. So I would be on 2 properties.
Got thumbs up there. And would the trust consider a different resale value? That basically doesn't look at interest rates. So Truckee allows a 3% increase a year, and I could look at other programs as well, but there is some concern that the price fluctuates with the covenant model. And if we were adopting the same model.
I'm gonna lean on Judy to come in on this one.
I don't know. I kind of like the Truckee model, but I don't know, Christy, how that sits with you. I think it's fine. I haven't put a lot of thought into it, but it makes sense to me. I may want to, I'm not trying to pass the buck. I may want to think about this a little bit more. And part of the problem is I've got to go because I've got a 2 o'clock meeting. I can't move. So I might either you resolve this or we defer it to, I think that, what's the next meeting? August 9th? Is that what we agreed on? Christy, I don't remember right now. I'm back in August. I think we're talking about this program some more at the August meeting.
Yes,
With the goal of hopefully approving and getting to an RFP.
I understand. I do understand. But if there's, I mean, and you may resolve this without me. I'm just saying, for me, I'd want to think about it more, but I think the Truckee model is fine.
Lee?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask Judy a question before she leaves. There's been a lot of discussion about possibly limiting the number of units or properties that you might include. And I'm wondering, is there a reason, Judy, that you can think of why each individual application down to each individual unit couldn't be considered on a case-by-case basis? All real property is unique, rather than creating, turn yourself into pretzels, businesses, how many units, et cetera. If they ask for 10, could you not give 2? What?
I would look at each unit.
Yeah. So if they ask for 10 and you decided to give them 1, that's better than 0.
That's your discretion. It's your program.
That's what I think. I think it should be discretionary for each application and each unit.
Yeah, I really do. I mean, it's your program. You have multiple objectives you're trying to meet. Not every property may meet all those objectives, but some units in a property might. If that makes any sense.
The more discretion you have, the stronger the program is.
I think right now that would be my advice. I mean, discretion is clear, but what are the boundaries of discretion? I think that's what an applicant needs to know. But certainly to be able to assert that some things are simply discretionary, it's in the very nature of an RFP process.
I agree.
I gotta go, guys. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Judy.
Sorry. Thank you, Judy.
Christy, I'll be in touch. Yeah, good to see you all. Bye.
Thank you, Judy. So perfect timing to wrap up the questions. So I think we made a lot of progress on those questions. I'll kind of re-edit them with the staff recommendations and recirculate them. Our next meeting is next week, which I don't think would be time to have some of these things addressed. And then Ellis, do you have our August meeting date in front of you?
I do. Sit and unmute.
Christy, the
And then
calendar
we have the next
August 6th.
So we'll add this to that agenda. And again, as Brian was saying, ideally we can finalize things. If you guys have questions in the meantime, just send them to me and Alice. We've been working with finance in the background to prep the RFP so that as soon as things are finalized, it can quickly get out the door. We do have a lot of interest that's come in. And so I just want to make sure that we're keeping that momentum going. So I'd like to keep this item open for the August meeting.
Great. Thank you, Christy. Meg?
Just to clarify, we have a meeting on the 16th, correct? And then we'll meet with Judy again on the 9th. do you plan on having meetings on the 22nd or the 23rd or the 30th? Thank you.
No.
Okay. My agenda page. I don't have my vice chair. Is there anybody willing to move us forward for a couple of minutes while I take a quick break?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'll do it.
Thank you, Tom. I'll be right back in 2 seconds. So we are on to the beginning of lease to locals. Actually, before we fully close, I asked Anne and Caleb to hold their questions to the end of that discussion, and I didn't give them an opportunity. Caleb, did you have a comment that you wanted to add in?
Yeah, I'll just quickly add, super appreciate all the leadership that this group is taking on, this complicated topic. I just wanted to echo the point that we need a massive number of restrictions to solve the problem. And they were very narrow in their restrictions, with the 30 hours per week worked in the county and 75% of your income. And that enabled them to get hundreds of deed restrictions. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Caleb. And Anne, did you have something that you wanted to add in on a?
Yes, it was regarding the conversation about like, could you foreclose if there were violations? And there was talk about like the covenant, how the covenant program did it. And it's through the use of an authority mortgage. So that's a zero money mortgage that allows the housing authority or enables them to foreclose on the property if there's complete violations.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne. That'll lead us in a good direction. Tom, I'm gonna take a 3-minute break, excuse me, and I'll leave it to you to take over.
Okay. So picking up on the agenda, we switched the 2 items, and we are, Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, coming back to item number 8, which is lease to locals discussion/action. So I would give it to Christy to introduce this item.
Perfect. So we have Colin and Julia, I see Julia too, on the call today. In review, we've been discussing their current lease to locals program that they've piloted through the Act Now community initiatives. And they've come to the trust originally with an ask for $550,000 to continue this program into a second year that would help provide an incentive for existing homeowners that are participating, and then encourage new homeowners to participate. That ask was reduced at our last meeting to $450,000 after a grant came in from Remain Nantucket. So Colin has prepared a presentation addressing some of the outstanding questions we had. And then I'll turn it over to him through you, Tom, to address some of those questions.
Colin, welcome back. You're like an honorary member of the trust at this point.
Yes, hello, old friends. Thank you for having me again. I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Christy. Get into present mode. And if I can get a thumbs up that you guys can see that, somebody. Okay, great. Thank you. So today we're going to come back to the questions that were asked at the last trust meeting on June 25th. We have some answers and some discussion, and then I believe we'll bring this to a vote for the $450,000, and hopefully we can resolve this. So last time the questions came in, so these were ones that came in from trust members. First one was Fair Housing Act question from Penny. I believe we're gonna, through council, to try to remember who, Lee.
Yeah, I'm prepared to answer that, but I think I should wait till Brian gets back.
He's there.
I'm now back. Yep.
Okay.
Go for it.
All right. So I did research the Fair Housing Act on the federal level as well as on the state level. My advice in general is, whereas the trust seems, the way I understand the program, not really in a position to be in the middle of assuring compliance, to instead, maybe as part of the grant agreement, require a certification on the part of Housing Nantucket that they would in turn ensure that all applicable fair housing laws are being complied with. And then we could maybe have a further discussion as to whether Housing Nantucket wants to include similar language in any agreement they may have with Placemate. And then the additional recommendation I have would just be that there be indemnification language running to the trust and to the town to back up any damages that might flow from a violation of that. But beyond that, I'm not sure, just given the structure of the program and where each of the parties sits, I'm not sure there's a lot more you can do.
Thank you, Lee. Colin, do you have any questions for Lee based on his concept of indemnification? And then Ann, I'll come to you.
Nope, that all seems good recommendations.
Ann?
Oh, that's kind of a surprise. That's a kind of a curveball. I don't know that we would be willing to take on that liability. My understanding, based on our the discussions with Provincetown, was that the fair housing liability went with the landlord. So the landlord was the one who was responsible for making sure that they were abiding by fair housing law. And it, you know, that it just goes down to that they're renting to protected classes or not discriminating to protected classes. And I really don't think it's appropriate to say that Housing Nantucket would be responsible for assuring that to the town. So
I may have mischaracterized that. So yes, it would be the landowner that's making that certification, but Housing Nantucket would ensure that you receive that certification. But my recommendation would still include the indemnification. You know, I don't know to what degree Housing Nantucket has the ability to monitor something like that. I mean, you know, certainly the trust is multiple steps removed other than granting the money, but in terms of maximizing legal protections, that's my advice.
well, I could see something through you, Mr. Chair. I could see something that, as it was part of the application for the funding, that perhaps there's some kind of waiver or some kind of assurance that the landlord provides as they sign to say that they assure you that they've not violated any Fair Housing Act. But it would be an assurance to the trust, I think, or but Colin, maybe
I would have them make it to everybody, meaning
right.
Trust, town, Housing Nantucket, Placemate. But yeah,
That makes sense.
Okay, Colin?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Sullivan. So we do have an attestation that outlines the key components of program guidelines that property owners sign. And we have program guidelines that are published on our site, would also be probably counter published on Housing Nantucket's, and if approved here, Affordable Housing Trust site. So we can button all that up. Lee, we could review it with you, make sure you feel comfortable with it after the fact. I think, you know, that what I'm hearing is the onus is on the homeowner, which is what we've always said. We make sure that's very clear in our onboarding calls of who you're looking for, what you can and can't say. Even when they post a self-listing, if we see someone posting a violation of Fair Housing Act, we have our own identification and we scrub for that and let them know they can't say no kids or only people over 45, right? There are protected classes that we watch for on our site. And then when we're getting applications, you know, we're reminding the homeowner they're signing this and they're seeing that. They know what they're getting themselves into. I think there's only so much compliance that can be done without being the landlord yourself. So we can take this guidance, I think, and move on from here if Chair Sullivan's okay with that.
Go ahead, Lee.
Great. The next one's oh, sorry, Lee.
Lee is to Lee. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Colin, are those applications actually reviewed by humans individually, or is it some kind of, you know, algorithm word search that spits out something if you're lucky?
Yeah, there's no AI at Placemate. It's humans. Yep.
Every single application gets reviewed by a person?
Correct.
Thanks.
Chair Sullivan, can I continue?
Does any members of the board have any questions for Colin or Lee? Okay, great. Nope, go ahead, Colin.
The next one was Placemates data policy. This was from Tom, and I believe Christy has an answer here. I'll wait till she comes. Oh.
Yeah, Christy might be away.
That's fine. I was on the email from the CTO that said we laid out our policies, and he said those look great. I mean, they're, you know, she can give more language, but Tom, I'm happy to forward those to you if you'd like. Okay. But the next one was, sorry, Chair Sullivan, can I continue? Okay, because just each one of these probably just needs to require that we're good because they were brought up by a member. Finance Department sign off on this and the use of the funds. Christy's on mute, but again, she said that she talked to your.
There she comes.
Oh, there she is. Hi, Christy. Christy, we were going back to data policy. It seemed like we were good on that one, and then Finance Department sign off. This is to you, so via Chair Sullivan.
Perfect. Yes, I did have a conversation with Brian Turbot, and that everything was okay. It'll be similar to a grant agreement, and then payment would be issued when things were submitted for reimbursement.
Great. The next question was what percentage of phase one pilot properties are expected to renew? We have a whole kind of breakdown of what that looks like. A couple of slides. We were able to reach out to 20 out of 21 of them. We normally wouldn't reach out to all of them until their mid-year check-in was in progress. So we were able to fast forward that a bit and got a hold of, like I said, almost all of them. I have some good insights to share there. And then there were 4 policy questions, which I'd like to just remind us that these were all good discussions, but we have recommendations from Christy from staff and have these outlined on the last slide of if we want to move forward for a vote. I think we have good point of view and have weighed opinions, and we'll finalize kind of each of the 4 of these. So I'm just going to move on unless anyone wants me to stop. All right. So the retention question that Penny had asked, so the primary thing we wanted to know was for the pilot properties, the 22, if we offered a additional incentive to renew for another 12-month lease with an incentive equal to 50% of what you originally received, would you renew? And then kind of secondarily, things came up where, we are now thinking about adding in income caps and rent caps. And so would the current properties be both subject to this, and or would they actually meet these new requirements? So we have some data and something to share on that, and that's actually going to, I think, become a very important discussion point for us here on the last slide. So this is a little bit of an eye chart here. We tried to make this somewhat easy to read. Again, I reached out to 21 of 22 of the property owners. None of them said they would not renew, which is fantastic. And very interestingly, 15% indicated they would renew with this 50% incentive that we offered. So I think the question Chair Sullivan had asked a couple of meetings ago was, how can we make sure retention is as high as possible? We don't want to see anyone left out on the street after the first year of this program. And so I think this 50% clearly is the sort of right number here. That's our suggestion. There are some that said they would not renew, and I've got some quotes from them. And we had a public comment from Sean Reed, who owns one of these properties, about why they'd like to see it higher than 50%. We didn't give an opportunity for them to say what exact dollar amount, because it was different property to property. And then one respondent was undecided. Chair Sullivan, I saw you raising your hand.
In the other markets, was it an 80% with no funding on a reimbursement?
That's the highest we've seen. It ranges between 50 and 80.
Okay, and so this is 71%.
Yep.
Great.
And then as just a reminder, these were the rent caps. I think I wanted to put this on the next slide, but if we go to the next slide, this actually shows some of the quotes. So this was in your packet. The theme here is these were the people that said they would only renew if they got more than 50%. I think Sean gave a really good perspective about the carrying cost of specifically for newer properties, you know, makes a lot of sense. You know, charging what they charge with a $27,000 up to $27,000 incentive was what worked for them at that point in time when they had just bought the property. But as we can see from the other slide, there's a lot of people, maybe they own the property for a while, they don't have higher interest rates, or they own the property outright, and the incentive is really just the, you know, catalyst for the conversion. So I think, you know, we certainly would see some defections. People may stay in their property and not participate if it was at this amount, if they want to raise the rent, for example. So these quotes kind of encapsulate this, you know, sort of themes we're seeing about I'd have to raise the rent, I would need more money, I don't want to have to go back to short-term renting, or, you know, whatever it is. So these were you know, sort of those 5 themes that we saw, or themes from those 5. The next was the rent cap. So I meant to show the proposed rent caps on this slide. So what I did is I looked at, okay, here's what people are currently renting at, and we knew the median was right around $3,200 a month. There's some that are as high as $5,000 because that was the max that we allowed. But our recommendation was to kind of lower the rent caps by unit size to control for affordability, because we had so much interest from this program. We really want to attract rentals that are at a more affordable rate. So you can see, you know, some of these, like, for example, the one I'm highlighting here, you know, this is a $5,000 a month 2-bedroom having converted from a short-term rental. And so, you know, that one, the question would just be, you know, are we okay with, if they want to renew, still charging above what our rent cap is? And we're going to discuss that at length. But I wanted to show that we have a fair amount of the, and actually, this should say 22, but we have 9 out of the 22 that are sort of would be out of compliance if subject to the rent caps. I wanted to flag that, plant that seed for us to come back to in the discussion items. So if there's no questions about that, we'll just, oh, Brian, go ahead.
Sorry, so the rent cap is the 175 qualification.
No, sorry, the rent cap is this year.
Okay.
Max, you can charge on top, so you'd be getting this amount as the landlord plus up to $27,000, right?
Right.
And so that's the idea. And we had gone out, I think, with Julia and I had decided with the private funding that we wanted to cast the widest net possible, have a max rental cap of $5,000 a month and see where it shakes out. The average was, you know, again, right around $3,200 a month. And if you look here, you can see there are definitely some, you know, a 2-bedroom for $3,000 or a 4-bedroom for $3,500, right? So we like those ones. What we didn't love seeing was, you know, a 1-bedroom for $3,500. We allowed it at this pilot phase, and then we thought maybe when we bring this to the trust, we should actually add in rent caps, which you guys should certainly weigh in on, that are, you know, at sort of these rental rates. And you know, staff and I and Julia, I think that these are a good point, you know, sort of to talk about. But these are, you know, the rental caps that we are proposing for all future ones, and we'll talk about the ramifications for the current, you know, phase 1 pilot program participants.
Colin, can you go back to the other spreadsheet real quick, just for a second?
Yeah, sure.
So looking down towards the bottom, there was a 2-bedroom single family house that charges $5,000 in rent, got the full $5,000 subsidy, but there's another 2-bedroom. Where was it? Okay, they're at $3,850.
And remember, the bedrooms aren't exactly tied to the number of qualified tenants always, right? So these aren't exactly going to be that a 3-bedroom is always 27,000, because you may only have 2 qualified tenants in a 3-bedroom.
Got it. Okay.
So this is kind of our, you know, meat and potatoes here. Again, I think Christy framed it up well. Ask is $450,000, but there are some policy discussions that we should have. So first was adding in the income restriction per qualified tenant. I think the discussion last time is we liked 175, which would be $187,000 and $187,600. And if we saw that the pilot phase 1 tenants didn't qualify for some reason, we could use the private funding that we have from Remain. So that would allow us to, you know, apply this 175 retroactively as well. But then obviously going forward as well, 175. I think it's worth discussing this if we like it, or if we need to, you know, move on.
Any members of the trust want to touch on that? Seeing no reaction, Colin, let's move on.
Okay, great. Next one was the discussion about blood relatives. I think we came up with an on the fly interesting compromise, which we've never done this before in any other market, where we allow sort of some blood relatives and some not. It's usually yes or no. But I think we thought if the property is converting from an active short-term rental, we have proof of that, we would allow it to convert to be rented, and the blood relative could be a qualified tenant. But if it was just an empty room being rented to your son, we wouldn't allow that, right? So I think this is a nice compromise. This is where Christy and I kind of came back and said we like this. Seeing some head nods. Great.
Good.
Next one, max number of 2 grants per property ownership group. Chair Sullivan, this was your suggestion. We have this in other markets as well. I think this makes a lot of sense to retain funds spread across this discussion in your previous agenda item. I think it's a easy and good suggestion to make sure the money is held, across multiple or allows for more participants on the ownership side. Great. Next one, pilot phase 1 lease renewals, incentivizing them at 50%. So again, if you kind of look at the math here, because we spent $320,000 on phase 1 incentives, we would be looking for, at 50%, it'd be right around 130,000. And so basically, that kind of assumes some attrition. I think we put that at 80%. So this dollar amount reflects this idea of giving 50% of the incentive to hold on to, as we're seeing right around 75% of the units. And again, we've heard dissent on that. We could go as high as 100% for the pilot property owners. We could go to 0% if we thought we wanted to roll the dice. We think 50% is a nice sort of medium and would maintain a high-ish retention rate. Okay, head nods. That's no discussion. Last one, rental caps. So should we add them? Should we not? If we do add in rent caps, so I guess, should we add them in? Do we like the amounts that we've put? And I can go back to that slide if we want to look at it again. And then do we hold phase 1 pilot property owners who are choosing to renew to those new rent caps? Our suggestion would be that you don't make them lower their rent, because then they may choose not to renew, and we're trying to avoid that. But you don't allow them to increase their rent more than 5%. So they can, they can maybe have a year-over-year increase if their property taxes went up, or they had a big HOA assessment, or some damages. So give a little bit of flexibility on what they can do for just the phase 1 properties. And this could be something to come back to for future renewals in year 2, year 3, and beyond. But we do this in other markets. We allow for rent increases at 1%. It's state by state. It varies on what's legal. But in Massachusetts, there is no statewide rent cap, and so we think 5% strikes a good balance.
Are there any questions on that, board members? Okay, let's keep moving, Colin.
All right. That's all I have. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about this program. I think now maybe it's time to place a vote.
Thank you. Any more conversation?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Tom.
would you please go back to the screen with the proposed rental caps by unit size?
Yeah, right here.
Thank you.
Can we help you think something through, Tom?
No, not really. Just mulling that over, given what I know about the market here.
One thing just to add in is, of course, there is a true gross rent collected by the landlord, right? Because they're going to get up to $27,000, right? So a 3-bedroom getting $27,000 is getting another $2,250 per month on top of that $4,000 they potentially can charge. So better lens maybe, which I should have shown here, but I can just illustrate with a 3-bedroom example. We did this in a previous meeting where we said a 3-bedroom charging $4,000 a month plus $2,250 is actually grossing $62.50 per month. It's just to play that back.
Yeah, the 3 bedrooms at you just said $62.50 a month. Meg, that's really helpful, Colin, to think about that.
I saw Christy with her hand up, so she might have been about to answer this, but I was wondering if staff had, first of all, point of order, do we need to clarify what our policy is around rent caps, or is that built in? Is
So
that
the rent caps are
standing?
the rent caps that were recommended were shown there.
Okay, so the ones on this slide that one, okay. And I guess I'm just curious if it through you, Mr. Chair, to PlaceMate, if they think that existing lease to local participants who do not meet these rental rate recommendations or requirements will continue. Is this going to be a problem for the program? What's the sense of that situation?
Yeah, our recommendation is that we would not hold the phase 1 pilot property owners to the new rent caps. Because again, we're trying to make sure that we have the strongest retention rate. So we are allowing an additional incentive at the original terms. We did, however, suggest that we want to make sure that the tenants are income qualified. So that is kind of the happy medium. Is, you know, you guys certainly have a commitment to spend your funds to make sure that funding is not going to a benefactor that's making above 240% AMI. We brought this down to 175. We're saying we will make sure that the trust fund are not spent on qualified tenants that are making above 175% AMI, you know, but we would allow, because the transaction was signed and the tenant did agree to the amount. You know, we look at these different amounts. Some people have different income levels. The houses wildly vary in quality, size, location, right? So this is not affordable housing with a capital A, where you're getting a unit down to a dollar amount per 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. A lot of rent schedules you've seen, it was a shot in the dark at 5,000. We think this tightening for all future trust funds allows us to feel, I think Judy said it really well, if this goes in the Boston Globe or the act.net, we don't want to see, you know, $5,000 a month 1 bedroom units that you gave somebody money for, right? That I think is the reaction that we got, was rent caps would be good to add in, and they're thoughtful. Tom and others could certainly weigh in as they look at them, and they could be changed. But that's our point of view.
Thank you.
I think there's also some element of free market in rent caps where, you know, we set a bar, but the quality of the unit, as you're describing, Colin, will fluctuate in the value of the unit rent.
Yeah, and that's a case to be made for in Truckee, for example, where we started this program. We were very nervous about rent caps by unit size because we were afraid people would anchor to them. So if you put $2,000 a month as a 1 bedroom, everyone would charge $2,000 because they would think of it as a rent schedule, not a rent cap, right? And so there is something to be said for the reason why we picked $5,000 a month versus having these, is that these will probably become what the rents are. So if you didn't want to make a move on the rent caps and keep them as they are, we would probably see a smattering like this. You know, we do another 20 or so, and we'd see some 3 bedrooms at 3,200, and we'd see some 1 bedrooms at 3,500. And that 1 bedroom at 3,500 could be a fantastic unit worth that and beyond, but the rent cap would preclude that homeowner from potentially using this program to rent that 1 bedroom. So it is kind of a philosophical thing. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen if you put rent caps in. I will say in all our future markets, including Provincetown, and Mammoth Lakes, which will be our next lease to locals market, we are recommending rent caps by unit size because we are sort of suspecting that rent schedules are actually, you know, okay, as long as we all agree that these are the right amounts.
The thing that the biggest thing that gets me on the program is that your point about net rents, right? That 1 bedroom that was running at, where was it, 3,000, is actually collecting $4,600 a month in net rent to that landlord. And that is what scares me in the free market, of that becoming the rent values of 1 bedrooms that aren't in the program. And it becomes more affordable, unaffordable. And so I don't think we're going to capture enough units, but to your point about it becoming a rent schedule is what I think we need the caps. I think when somebody's looking at it and seeing that they're collecting 3,000 on a 1-bedroom and a subsidy of 27, they're actually netting $4,600 a month on a 1-bedroom. That boggles my mind.
So there are some controls in place. I don't have them in these slides right now, but I could pull up we do limit the amount you can get based on the unit size. You can't get $27,000 renting a private room because you couldn't put 3 qualified tenants in there. So there are some controls for making sure there isn't overcrowding, making sure that you're not gouging by by not allowing you to have 3 qualified tenants in a 1-bedroom, for example, right? So I hear you, and I think we could go back and forth a lot on this. I think there probably just needs to be a decision on: do you like these rent caps? Do you want to keep it at 5,000 and have it as it is and know that it'll shake out where it shakes out, or do you want to be more prescriptive? And is this the right prescription for the problem, or whatever the analogy is?
Christy, thank you, Colin.
Thanks. Just with us using affordable housing funds, I think having the rent cap by unit size makes sense, because when you say that you had the $5,000 rent caps and then you see the 1-bedrooms going for $3,500, that's going to be really hard for affordability for a family under 175 AMI. So I just think that putting some sort of limit on each of the bedroom sizes helps keep things affordable with these funds.
Okay, are there members with other points, questions, thoughts? If this is something we want to wrap up today and bring to a vote, whether we want to move towards a grant agreement. Are there any motions or that a member would like to make, or to look to Christy to make one on behalf? Go ahead, Meg.
I'd like Christy to make a recommendation for a motion, please.
Okay. Through you, Chair, if the board is interested in moving forward, I would make a motion to have staff work with town council to draft a grant agreement for funds up to $450,000 for a partnership with Housing Nantucket and Placemate for the relaunch of the Lease to Locals program, with rent caps by units and an affordability serving tenants up to the 175% AMI. I think that.
Christy, can I add to that it is a 1-year pilot? And I don't know that the detail of 2 properties per owner is important, or.
We'll make sure that's in the policy of the program.
Okay. Any other conversation? Would
Mr.
anyone like to? Okay, Tom.
I would just add this, and I'm sure you're going to do this anyway, Christy, but come back to the trust and regularly update us on the progress of et cetera, please.
Absolutely.
At this amount of money, is this the bucket that this is coming from, does this need select board approval?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so another friendly amendment to your proposed motion, subject to select board approval. Would anyone be interested in making a motion as Christy described as I amended?
I'd like to make a motion as Christy described and you amended, please.
I'll second it.
Second from Chantal. Any further discussion? Seeing none, a vote by roll call. Meg Browers,
Aye.
Tom Dixon,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Chantal Murphy,
Aye.
Boris Bell,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan's an aye. Great. Now we will move on to the next item. Colin, thanks for all your work.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you for taking this on.
Thank you, Colin.
Huge, thank you very much.
Okay, and of course, Christy, thank you. Where am I? Lease to locals, year-round deed restriction, other business, July 16th, next meeting, 12:30 PM. We've talked about that a handful of times. Any more discussion? None. Moving down. Board comments? Any board comments?
Mr.
Again,
Chair.
I'd like, yes, Tom?
Chris, did you have any thoughts on maybe doing some press on this? I'll just leave that as a rhetorical point.
Okay.
I mean, what we just voted, of course. Not board comments.
Only comment I'll make is, Forrest, welcome. Thank you for your participation during the meeting. We're excited to have you. Please reach out to any of us. I'm gonna offer everybody else too, if you have any questions or want to catch up or learn more.
Thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it. I'm very happy to be here.
Welcome.
Any other board comments? Seeing none, close that. Are we moving to executive session today, Christy? Yes, okay. So we will be looking for a motion to adjourn regular session, not to return, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or real value of property. I see 44 Maya Comet Road, 48 Maya Comet Road, and an open meeting may have a detrimental effect to the negotiating position of the Affordable Housing Trust. Would anybody like to make that motion?
So move, Mr. Chair.
Second? Second from Meg by roll call. Forrest Bell.
Aye.
Meg Browers.
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
John Tom Murphy.
Hi.
And Brian Sullivan's aye. Great. We'll see you there.
Thanks all.